Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It is February 1st and today's video is going to be my January reading wrap up. January was such a good reading month. I read 11 books, no DNFs, thankfully, and I loved most of these books. Really enjoyed all of them, honestly. So I'm excited to talk about them. Most of them are for the Brighter Winter Reading Challenge, and I will mention the challenges that they filled. So I think what I'm going to do first is start with the books that were not part of the Brighter Winter Challenge, and then I'll go through the ones that I did do for the challenge. Coffee. Yes. Okay, the first book that I read this month that I actually didn't read for the Brighter Winter Challenge, but I did read it for Chantel Reads All Day, her Read Your Bookshelf Challenge. And let's just say we started this year off with such a good book. This is the 11th Hour by Michael Phillips. It is quite chunky, and as you can see, I annotated it to the nth degree. This book was so good, and it is the third Michael Phillips series I've read, and I can tell this is going to be another favorite series. It is about a family in Prussia, set in Prussia, 1937. The World War II is breaking out, and it is this family story. They live on a beautiful farm with a beautiful rose garden, and the rose garden plays a huge part in this, hence the title of the series, The Secret of the Rose trilogy. No, not trilogy, Secret of the Rose. That is the name of the series. And so it's so much in this book that I don't even know what to say. But Dietrich Bonhoeffer is in this book. I highly, highly, highly recommend. 5 stars easily. Made me cry. The representation of Jesus in this, the last few chapters, just wow. Okay, another book I read that was not for the challenges, for the Brighter Winter Challenge, was Stealing the Preacher by Karen Whittemire. I have no words. This was such a fun read, a fun palate cleanser. I had definitely read some emotional books this month, like at least 3, 4, maybe 5 books made me tear up, and some of them I'll talk about later. I actually sobbed. But this was just a fun palate cleanser, and it is book 2 in the Archer Brothers series by Karen Whittemire. And I just love these characters and the relationship, and the beginning is quite hilarious. So basically, let me just read the back, actually. On his way to interview for a position at a church in the piney woods of Texas, Crockett Archer can't believe it when he's forced off the train by an outlaw and presented to the man's daughter as the preacher she requested for her birthday. And it just goes on from there, and it is just so cute and so sweet. And like, when I think of this book, I just think of pure fun. Like, it was just fun. So highly recommend this. I highly recommend the first book, The Short Straw Bride, or I think it's just Short Straw Bride. That's kind of a tongue twister. Stealing the Preacher is the second book, and 5 stars for sure. Honestly, I'm doing a few of my favorite things when I do these videos: drinking coffee and talking about books and holding books and looking at books. Yes. Okay, and then the last book that I read, that besides a novella that I'll talk about later, that I read that did not fulfill any of the challenges, was Until Unity by Frances Chan. And I mean, if that doesn't speak for itself, I don't really know what else you need to know. Read this book. Every Christian, honestly, should read this book. It brings out unity in a way, like, what is scriptural and what is scriptural unity and the role the Trinity plays and how that corresponds with unity, and just makes unity look so simple. And unity is not easy, but it is simple. Like, love each other. And then we have those questions of like, well, we don't agree on this, and I see this different, and it just speaks about what to do and brings in scripture. And I honestly love Francis Chan because he just, throughout his books, sometimes he'll tell you to just stop and sit in the presence of God and let the words of like scripture or a prayer he's written like just wash over you and sit in God's presence. And I would recommend this to anybody. Even if you feel like, whether it's your family or your church or whatever, that you're not really struggling with unity and you feel unified, I still would recommend this because it's just so good. And so 5 stars for this one. Okay, and then moving on to what I actually read for the challenges. First one I finished was The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind by William Kwamba? I'm so sorry. I don't know how to pronounce the name. And Brian Mueller. This is fulfilled the prompt of a new to me middle grade book. And I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. It is the story about a young boy in Africa, but a little boy in Africa who went through some really hard things. Famine came through their land and sickness, and he was very intrigued with science. I can't talk. He was very intrigued with science, but they were so poor that they could not send him to school. And so they had a little library in their little town, and he made a windmill. And it changed the town. And it was just a really cool middle grade. It is nonfiction. It's a true story. I don't know if I mentioned that. I definitely think my little brother would enjoy the story when he's a little bit older because he's very intrigued with science. I honestly, like, science doesn't really intrigue me. Science was never my favorite subject in school, but I still enjoyed this, and it wasn't too sciencey, even though it was cool how he explained the different parts. And also some of the things in here that their family went through just broke my heart. So definitely would recommend this. The next challenge I completed was to read a book with a green cover. And so I read The Innkeepers of Ivy Hill by Julie Klassen. Another prompt was to buddy read a book. And so me and Carmen actually buddy read this book together, and it was a very fun time. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and honestly, after a few weeks, I kind of am interested in the rest of the series because this is a series. And it was slow at times, but the longer it went, the more interested in the characters I got. And there are a lot of characters, and there's somewhat of a mystery. I don't know if it's really a mystery. It's just like lots of questions. But yeah, the way it ends is satisfying, but there's definitely characters whose story is not finished, and I want to know what happens. So it is, I didn't even say what it's about, but it's about a young widow who inherited her husband's inn, and she was not expecting it, and they're about to have to be closed because of their financial difficulties, and it's just her trying to figure out a way to save the inn and the characters that come along with it. So I would recommend this, and I'm excited to find the rest of this series. I probably won't like go out of my way to buy them, but if I find them in the thrift store or something, why not? Always. I'm telling you guys, living 2 minutes from the thrift store with an amazing book section, it is not good for the bank account. my collection has grown, which is not a bad thing, but it's just like, you know, I need to calm down a little bit. But buying books are like a whole other hobby. Okay, but that is not what we're here to talk about. Then for the challenge to read a nonfiction book by a female Christian author, I read The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. I had read this one several years ago, but I had just purchased it and wanted to read it again. And if you haven't read Corrie's story or heard of it, I highly recommend looking into it. And she was harboring Jews in Holland, and was taken to prison, and it's her story of going through the prison camp and all the things that come with that. And such a good, powerful story. Highly recommend. And I gave it 5 stars, and I think this one made me cry or tear up too, so we love to see it. And then we're here to talk about possibly my favorite book of the month. That's kind of hard to choose, but guys, when I tell you I cried in this book, I cried so much in this book, not just like at one place, but at multiple different places. And this book fulfilled the challenge for read a debut. And that, my friends, is Whose Waves These Are by Amanda Dykes. I love her writing. Her writing style is just easy to read, intriguing, and the characters and the emotion and the history, the story. I don't even know if I can tell you what this is about. Honestly, some of my favorite books are like that. Like, I get so immersed in the feelings of the story that I can't even tell you exactly what it's about, but oh my word. It's a dual timeline, so you're going from one timeline back to another timeline. About a man who wrote a poem for fallen soldiers in the war. World War II. And it was basically a call for people to send in rocks to him for any loved ones or men they know who died in the war. And then that's like the past timeline, and then the present timeline is his great niece or his niece, maybe. No, I think it's his great niece coming, and I don't really want to say anything because I don't want to ruin it or don't want to spoil it at all, but I loved it. And this cover is so pretty. Like, it is in such good condition, and I bought it at our thrift store. I mean, I don't own the thrift store. It's not my thrift store, but it's the thrift store that the mission we work for. So yes, I highly, highly, highly recommend this book, and read it. Oh, me too, thought that was scary. And then I read Up From the Sea, which is actually like book 0.5 in this. Like, it's not a series, but it did have like a prequel. It's like basically less than 100 pages. So it was like a prequel to Whose Waves These Are. And I enjoyed it. I read it on my Kindle. I gave it 3.75 stars. Just kind of a cute little story of the man who wrote the poem in Whose Waves These Are. It's his mom's story and how she met his father, and like kind of the beginning of that, and the tie-ins. Like, it was such a short book, and I feel like novellas are just like that. Like, they don't get as high of a rating because I just want more. But like, as far as a novella goes, it was a great novella. But like, hinting at what's to come in the book Whose Waves These Are is just, it was really cool. So I recommend reading that. You don't have to read it before. I actually read it after I read Whose Waves after I read Whose Waves These Are, after I read Whose Waves These Are, so you can do whatever you prefer. It was kind of fun to already know the story that's coming after that, and then, yeah, I don't know. So I recommend that as well. And then, oh my goodness, literally this month was full of all the good books. I read Persuasion by Jane Austen, and I think this is my favorite Jane Austen. And this cover is really cool. Wow, the sun though. It is fake leather, so it's not paperback, and it's not really hardcover. And it has a little string bookmark, and it was really fun to read in here. In this edition. It was really fun to read in this edition. That's what I'm trying to say. But I really love this book. I took it super slowly. In the past when I've tried to read Jane Austen, I've been just more like, okay, I'm gonna try to get through this quickly. And I didn't enjoy it as much, but I read a chapter a day basically. And but I don't even know where I was at, but I loved this story. I'm not gonna explain it, but let me read the quote on the back. There could have been no two hearts so open, no tastes so similar, no feelings so in unison, no countenances so beloved. And I loved the two main characters in this book. And I cannot wait to watch the movie because I've never watched the movie. And I was reminded how stupid some characters are in Jane Austen's books. Like, it adds to the story, but I'm just like, you dumb people. Maybe that's not nice to say, but they're fictional characters. So, yeah, I highly recommend this classic. I really loved it. Oh, and I forgot to mention, this fulfilled the prompt, read a classic you think you should have read before. Any Jane Austen at this point. The next book fulfills the prompt to read a book published in 2022, and the book that I read for this is I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. I borrowed this from the library. I actually need to take it back tomorrow, so, you know, the timing of this video is perfect. I really, really enjoyed this. I gave it 4.5 stars. One thing about her books, they're not Christian. There is some swearing, like a little bit of language. It is not overpowering or a ton. I think they may have used Lord in vain, which I never want to condone that in any capacity. But all the other language, like usually in historical fiction, especially during a war, that is in books. So that's just a little bit of something if you're curious. But again, it didn't bother me that much because it wasn't a ton. But the story was really interesting, and I feel like I kind of knew the premise a little bit, but it was different, and there were things thrown at me that I was not expecting. And I honestly love her writing so much. And her chapters, I love short chapters, and her chapters are hardly ever more than 5 pages. And like, let me find. And she, honestly, her writing could remind me of how I journal a little bit. She doesn't always even use complete sentences. It's like, his words, they return to me often, like 2 separate sentences. And then, I could trust no one, not even myself. I don't know, I don't know if that probably does not make any sense, but the way she writes is just interesting to me, and I love reading this type of writing. And the story was really interesting. Did I tear up on this too? I don't remember if I did or not, but there were several times I was physically reacting to what was happening. Like, I did that several times. The war was, what even war was this? Oh, this is Romania. This is set in Romania. Sorry, I'm all over the place right now. Romania, 1989. But Romania was under a horrible dictatorship, communist dictator, and he has to, the main character Christian has to work for the government or the police, whatever it was called, to get medicine for his grandfather. And there's secrets and there's just lots of things, and I just really enjoyed it. So whoa, that's really cool. I'm gonna be keeping my eye out for this book because I want it on my shelf with my other Ruta Sepetys, because honestly her covers are very beautiful. So really enjoyed that one. And we're down to the last book. I read this one on my Kindle. It was a book that fulfilled the prompt for read a book in which the main character is 60 plus, and that book is The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp. And I've heard people in the Christian booktube community talking about this book, and it was so good. I want to get it physically because I feel like I would have loved it even more physically, and I give it 5 stars. The main character, Mrs. Kipp, just the sweetest woman, and she is in like a nursing home or an old person's home because she has cancer and she's dying. And there's a young woman who works for a paper who got herself into a sticky situation and now has to write she thinks she has to write the obituary for Mrs. Kipp, but there's some underlying things with that is going on, and I won't say anything else about that. But I definitely teared up in this one too. Like, Mrs. Kipp reminded me so much of my grandmother who passed away from cancer in 2016, and like the scenes, her last moment scenes, telling people goodbye and like people realizing it was the last time that they would ever talk to her, just like pulled at my heartstrings, because it just reminded me of my grandma Carol, who was, if you knew her, she was the sweetest lady ever, and yeah, made me miss her and brought back memories. But literally Mrs. Kipp was such like a new favorite character, like added to the list of favorite characters. So full of life, so full of spunk, and even though she's dying and can't do much, she is trying to find a way to get around the rules of the nursing home, and it's adorable. And the faith content is so good. The character development in the reporter who comes to write her obituary, it's just such a heartwarming story, and I definitely want to get this one on my shelves as well. So 5 stars for that one. Okay, so that is it for my January wrap up. I hope you enjoyed listening to me stumble through my words for this video and talking about these books. I so enjoyed this month of reading, and I'm super excited about February. February is going to be a busy month, so we're going to have to use strategy in my reading. So I'm hoping for another great month, and yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you in my next video. Bye!